Hi guys, welcome to Drum Dog, and in today's lesson we're going to be checking out a cool little hi-hat choke trick that can spice up your funk grooves. Now, I remember the first time I heard this little choke trick and I thought to myself, wow, that's a super cool place to put a choke. So the first thing I did was hop on a kit and I tried to put a choke there, and it was so incredibly difficult. To be playing a 16th note groove up to that speed, like a kind of 1 2 3 4, and then be catching a choke on the and then still have freedom to play different bass drum and snare drum stuff was kind of really blowing my mind, and how I could make it sound so effortless and not have the choke take over too much of the groove. Because I'm sure you guys can agree when you're listening to that groove there, the choke doesn't so much take an overbearing role in that groove. It's more kind of like an extra tiny little detail that we add in. But then at some point I realised the trick wasn't to think about the choke and try to play the choke. The trick was to play a normal broken 16th hand pattern, like a 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4, and then just step eighths on the hi-hat. Now, I'm not even trying to play these chokes when I play this little trick. It's more of an accidental result of playing that broken 16th pattern and stepping the hat at the same time. That said, that still doesn't make this trick super easy, as it actually is still a coordination challenge. It's a 4-way funk groove and there is a lot to think about and settle in. So first things first, let's break this down and then build it back up. So firstly, all we're going to want to do here is practice stepping eighths on the hi-hat. Now, that is actually quite a lot for the left foot to be stepping every single eighth note there, but I can really recommend going for this heel up instead of heel down, so we're kind of bouncing the whole leg to step those eighths instead of just using that ankle, which does fatigue pretty quickly in that situation. And for our first groove here, we're going to be stepping those eighth notes while we just play quarter notes on the ride with a simple kick and snare beat. Now, while you're playing that beat there, the focus really wants to be just getting comfortable at stepping those eighths and finding a leg movement that's comfortable for you to keep up those eighth notes without too much fatigue. Like I said before, the bouncing leg heel up thing really works for me and gives me that constant and consistent step without tiring too much. But experiment around with that and find out what works for you. So the next step here is going to be to add in our broken 16th pattern. So let's keep everything we're doing the same, but instead of just playing quarters on the ride cymbal, let's up it to our broken 16th pattern of 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1. Here we go. Now, if you've played that groove and you've got that feeling comfortable, you now have everything together that we need to throw in this little choke trick. All we've got to do is move our right hand from the ride cymbal over to the hi-hats. Now, there are a couple things we have to bear in mind to make that choke come out while we play this. Number one is how we're playing the hi-hat with our hand. We definitely want to keep the tip of the stick on the top of the hats for this, because we want that kind of delicate touch and that little kind of quaint little choke. We're not going for a big aggressive choke on that So for all 3 hits of that entire broken 16th pattern, we're using tip on the top hat only, not the shoulder on the edge of the hats. So keep that in mind. The second thing we're going to have to keep an eye on here is how we're stepping those hats. So when we were playing the ride cymbal and we're stepping those 8ths, the only thing we're worried about is when the hats are closing, so when our foot is coming down. But now we're catching that little choke on the where our foot comes up actually becomes relevant. Now, strangely enough, the quicker you play the groove, the less of a problem this is, because our foot is naturally in a constant motion and it's up as much as it is down. But when we first approach this and we try and play this groove a little bit slower, you may find that you have to consciously lift your foot up off of the hats a little bit earlier than you naturally would, just in order to catch that choke. Try not to let that bear on your mind too much and take up too much of your brain capacity for the coordination here, but it's just worth bearing in mind if you're not catching those chokes coming through. Be careful with your left foot that it's coming up and down evenly while we're stepping those 8ths. And that is it. That is that little funk hat choke trick. Now that does take a little second to get it sounding good and bring it up to speed, but remember, the trick here is not to think about the chokes. The chokes are just an accidental result of our broken 16th pattern and stepping our hats on 8ths. Now we've got that little trick happening, let's check out a few different ways we can add to this to really bring that kind of funk element back to life. Now the first way we can change this is, instead of catching our choke on the we could always move our right hand pattern and play our chokes on the E instead. So this time, instead of our pattern being 1 and a 2 and a 3, so on, our pattern's now going to be 1 E and, 2 E and, 3 E and, 4 E and. Everything else stays the same, our hat stepping stays the same, but we're now shifting those chokes to all of our E's. Let's check it out. So another way we can change this groove up and bring a little bit more to it is by changing up our bass drum pattern and adding in a few more hits. So what we're going to do is we're going to up to a 1 and at the beginning. We're going to drop beat 3 and we're going to go 3 E and just after beat 3 in that classic kind of funk held drop beat sense. We're going to move our hat chokes back to that original position of the and lock in this new bass drum pattern. Now at this stage, the only ingredient that's missing from our funk groove is, of course, some ghost notes on the snare to really bring in that funky vibe. So we're going to keep our bass drum pattern the same as our last groove. We're just going to add in a few cheeky little ghost notes that work around that bass drum pattern to really bring this whole thing to life. So there we have it. Now this little funk trick is actually a super subtle but surprisingly effective way to bring an extra percussive element to your funk grooves. I really hope you've enjoyed the few different ways we've looked at it there, but as always, take this concept, use it to create your own grooves and put different kick and snare patterns underneath it, see what you can come up with. I really hope you guys enjoyed this lesson today. If you want to see more lessons like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if you want to see our full-length lesson packs, then check out our website, drum.dog. We'll see you again soon.